The weather affects everything, from how we feel to how we live. But what's really going on above us? Each week on Atmospheric Insight, we dig deeper into the science of weather and the stories it shapes. This is Atmospheric Insight, where science meets the sky.
And we're meeting you right back here in our studio. Hi, I'm meteorologist Adam Epstein.
Meteorologist Riley O'Connor.
Riley, another week of activity here.
Yeah.
We've got plenty to talk about, and it's not just your classic meteorology, but we're going to dabble in the geology side of things, all right? Let's talk about a little earthquake that occurred. This was yesterday, so we're talking about Tuesday. There was a 2.8 magnitude earthquake centered in Granite Bay. Just one report, no aftershocks reported, and people felt it.
Yeah.
You didn't feel it though, right?
I did not feel it, unfortunately. It'd be fun to feel a little one.
Yeah, you're pretty far away from that. And here in Sacramento, I was working while it happened. It was about 6:35 p.m.
Yeah.
I didn't feel any shaking, but I got a message from Riley Carroll, who said her dad in Roseville asked if there was an earthquake. So I went right on the USGS website. Nothing reported, but then truly 2 minutes later, it popped up.
Yeah.
2.8.
Yeah.
And then I posted about it on Facebook, asked if anyone else felt it, and a lot of people did. So Roseville, Lincoln, Folsom, up through Auburn, and then even north to Meadow Vista, pretty far away on Highway 80. And people had all of an interesting description of what happened. It was very consistent. They said first they heard a boom, and then they felt one jolt, and it was over. And I thought it was interesting that everyone was hearing a boom. I was thinking, well, was it an earthquake then, right?
Yeah.
Like, could it have been like an explosion of some sort, something else had happened? And yeah, as meteorologists, this is a secondary science for us, right?
Yeah.
Geology. So I looked it up and I was trying to research what could cause a boom before anyone feels an earthquake. And I found a really interesting response from the USGS that the ground vibrates so suddenly and it's so massive, right? We're talking about the earth.
Yeah.
That its vibration moves up into the air and compresses the air molecules, and it creates that vibration through the air, and that produces a sound.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's the earth moving up so suddenly, touching the air, the atmosphere. The atmosphere goes boom.
Okay, I learned something. I was saying, so what? It's not the initial fault movie making that noise, right?
Right. That could have been a possibility too, right? But apparently, it's the ground, the earth interacting with the air. And when it comes to the scale here, 2.8, it's weak, right? And I posted there was a weak earthquake. Someone said it didn't feel weak. Well, this is how it's described, right? It's minor, anything 3 or below. Once you get to 6, that's strong, and anything above that is frightening. 7, 8, 9. And you've lived through some earthquakes, right?
Yeah, the biggest one I felt was it was a little over 5, so it definitely felt it. It was when I was living in Southern California, the LA area, Sherman Oaks. I remember when you hear the quakes, it does have it has the rumble, right? And then there's different ones. Certain ones it's a jolt feeling, and other ones more of like a sway.
Yes,
I guess depending on the exact fault or what it is, if it's a strike slip or a thrust fault, right?
There you go. That's good. Yeah, you know your science.
I know. It's kind of a fascination of mine, but it's kind of fun to feel, but I don't want to be in a big one.
Right. Do you remember the first time you felt an earthquake and the feeling you had?
I do remember it, actually. So interesting enough. So this wasn't in Southern California, but it was in Indiana. So Indiana has the New Madrid fault line that runs up through there. And then the Wabash Valley fault zone off the Wabash River. And this was when I was in middle school. We had one, and my mom has a curio cabinet, and it rattled, and she had her little figurines that fell over. So that was my first time feeling it.
Did you realize what it was?
Yeah, I mean, you really didn't. They don't talk about it as much, but then once that happened, we realized, there's a fault. It's just not as active as what it is out here. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I remember the first time I felt an earthquake. I was maybe around 19, 20 years old. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And I was in a house, and I noticed something felt off, but I wasn't quite sure. And some light fixtures were moving slightly. So I opened the door and looked outside, and the street lamps, the lights there, were waving back and forth. And I realized, wow, this is an earthquake.
That's a pretty good one too. Do you remember what it ranked?
I don't know what it was, but that's the first and only time I've ever felt an earthquake.
Yeah.
And here in California, you think, oh, well, this is earthquake land, right?
Yeah.
Well, not quite. For some, yes, you have the San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, the Calaveras
Mhm.
Fault, all in the Bay Area, Northern California. Those are infamous, right?
Mhm.
And like everyone talks about how San Francisco is overdue for another big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the chance of damage there is much higher. But I say this all the time on TV when we talk about earthquakes. If you love California and hate earthquakes, Sacramento is the perfect place for you.
Right.
Generally, the Central Valley, because there are no fault lines here.
Yeah.
So, our chance of minor damage, which is defined by something that's felt by all, many
Mhm.
frightened, some heavy furniture moved, a few instances of fallen plaster, damage slight.
Yeah.
The chance for that in Sacramento is less than 1%.
Yeah.
All right. So, we're safe here.
You would think too, with a big one, in the Bay of San Andreas, if it went, we'd feel it here. I mean, but it's interesting to
Yeah.
see that the region.
And it's pretty fascinating because it's not just, the Bay Area and the San
Yeah.
Andreas Fault, but on the other side of us, we have the mountain range of the Sierra, and that is formed by tectonic plates meeting each other. So there's fault lines through there too. So literally on both sides, the left and the right, we are looking at areas that are very prone to significant earthquakes, but right here in the middle, sweet spot.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you feel the recent one? Oh, I guess not, but it was the one from Nevada.
No. Yeah.
'Cause people here in the studio felt it around.
Yeah, I've never noticed one while living in California.
Okay.
It's possible that it's happened, but like a lot of people, they get confused by it. I
Yeah.
mean, when it happened to me in North Carolina, I wasn't quite sure what was going on.
Mhm.
Probably unless you're very accustomed to earthquakes, you might just feel like a train is passing by, right? Or there's just some type of big vehicle that is shaking the ground a little bit.
Mhm.
Doesn't feel like, the world is falling. But I have been in an earthquake simulator. They bring those to Sacramento every year
Oh,
for
that's
like
fun.
earthquake safety, and that got up to like a magnitude 7 or 8.
What'd it feel like?
And you're sitting in a chair with a seatbelt on, and like you're holding on. And it's no. And there's
Yeah.
something interesting about that too. I remember like the old advice, right, for when you're in an earthquake is, right, like get under something and maybe brace yourself in a doorway. But when that type of shaking occurs, you barely have time to like realize what's happening,
Yeah.
let alone stand and think about where you're going to go and actually get there on your
Mhm.
feet. So now it's really just like get down and cover.
Yeah.
That is the advice.
Right. And if you're, thinking about it in a doorway, you want to try to get in a doorway, but also your head's probably in a different space when it's happening because you're looking
Right.
around like, what's going on? And by the
Yeah.
time you do that, it's over.
Be hard to execute that plan.
Right.
All right, let's talk about a different type of severe event. And this is just your classic severe weather. It's severe weather season in the Midwest. I want to explain why in this week's Ask Adam.
It's no secret that spring is severe weather season here in the U.S. Just take a look at all of the severe thunderstorms and tornadoes that have been happening across the Great Plains, the Midwest, and the Southeast pretty much daily. But do you know why? Give me just 1 minute and I'll explain. Spring is a time of change, a time of flux in our temperatures, where you have cold air moving out and warm air moving in. But now you have air masses fighting for position. And when they meet each other and collide, that collision could be a violent one. It produces fronts. Fronts produce rising air produces thunderstorms, and if they're strong enough, you can have tornadoes form. And here in the US, we have this infamous area called Tornado Alley. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's unlike anywhere else on the planet, where you have all of these characteristics come together that are perfect for tornadic formation. First of all, it is very flat, so there are no hills or mountains to knock tornadoes off kilter and make them collapse. Second, you have not just 2 air masses, but 3 air masses that come together. One from the north, a warm one that's dry from the west, and a warm one with moisture from the southeast out of the Gulf of Mexico. So that makes it even more likely that you have these violent collisions of air masses. There are other places around the world that have tornadoes. There's a place in Argentina and Brazil called Paseo de los Tornados. There's a place in Bangladesh, Bay of Bengal, and Europe gets hundreds of tornadoes a year, but none of them have all of the characteristics that the US Tornado Alley has. So none of them tend to get as strong as ours, EF4s and EF5s, which are just super destructive. And one interesting thing about Tornado Alley that you might think of, Kansas, Oklahoma, right in the center of the US, looks like that's shifting. Over the past couple of decades, we've seen more tornadoes across the Midwest and Southeast than that region of the US. And that's a change that we'll be watching for the next couple of decades as well.
Tornado
Interesting.
Alley, right? Everyone's heard of it,
Mhm.
but it's changing. There's kind of a new Tornado Alley that's being accepted in the meteorological community, and bad for everyone who lives in the Southeast.
Right, and it's interesting too because if you look at the different tornadoes, it's like you wanna visualize and you see that beautiful funnel, it's like that picturesque, not that they're
Movie
great,
style, yeah.
movie style tornadoes, but when you get into the South, parts of the South, I should say, you get these really nasty, just huge tornadoes, and
Yeah.
they're wedge tornadoes, and it's vicious.
After EF3s, 4s and 5s, they lose their shape because they're so
Yeah.
massive at the base, and it's just a whirlwind of destruction.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have no desire to be anywhere near that,
No.
like, watching that from afar.
Right. Do you
Alright,
remember the Tuscaloosa tornado?
Tuscaloosa?
Yeah.
No.
That was we'll have to Google that or
Okay,
YouTube it, it's
we'll have to
interesting.
do another, segment
Yeah.
on, tornadoes in our stories of severe weather, but that is for another time. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. Stick with us.
Thanks for joining us today on Atmospheric Insight. Today, I'm gonna be talking with school counselor Mackenzie Moak, with Birch Elementary in Davis, here in California. Thanks, Mackenzie, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I wanna dive in and talk about, the heat. It's
Mhm.
been getting hot out, and I know children sometimes that affects their learning process in school, especially with mine. I have twins that go to Birch, and I notice sometimes when it's hot out, their attention span may be a little different. I want to talk a little bit about this. What are some of the most common mood and behavioral changes in students when temperatures go up and they're on the rise?
Yeah, I think exactly what you said, what you're seeing within your own children happens across, all of our students on campus. Especially, I mean, I think as adults, we recognize that, like, oh, it's nicer to be outside. And so I think that kind of translates also with the kids, but in a different way. Whereas, like, maybe we're seeing, more escalated behaviors, if you will, because they're excited maybe about the warmer weather and getting to be outside and all of the fun sports and things that go on in the spring. So I think what you see within your own children and then what we're seeing on campus definitely correlate, and the warm weather does bring out lots of new things that we don't see in the fall and the winter.
Right. And going through that, do you feel that kids sometimes play differently outside? Are they more aggressive when it's hot and then they come in and then they're in a cooler environment? How does that affect them?
Sure. Yeah, I think with all of the competitiveness that happens within elementary schools, definitely in the springtime. I mean, it's nicer weather and it's warm out, and the competitiveness, yes, it does seem to like rise a little bit. I'm not sure uh if I can say that, it's not happening in the winter too, like when basketball is going on or anything like that. But it certainly is something that, like, they are more competitive and then they come back into the classroom, and it does take a little bit longer for them to kind of wind back down, calm down. The cooler settings inside the classroom obviously help, but yeah, I think that extra level of like the heat and then the competitiveness all play a factor into how maybe it takes a little bit longer, I would say, when they come back into the classroom for
Okay.
them to regulate again.
Speaking of that, my kids sometimes want to fight me on taking water bottles to school, and I know it's recommended. If they don't take water bottles and it is hot outside, how frequently can they have water breaks? How frequent can they go out to the water fountain at school and take those breaks to cool down?
Yeah, I think it's up to the teacher how often they want to allow their kids to go, but I do want to say that as the weather gets warmer, teachers are more conscious of the warmer weather, and so if they take their kids out to PE, or they're outside at recess, they're constantly reminding them to bring their water bottles with them. If they don't have them, we have watering stations that they can either refill their waters or drink from the fountain. So I think it's definitely more of a reminder as the weather is getting warmer.
Good advice there.
Yeah.
I want to talk about younger children because I know you specifically work right now with elementary kids. Younger children or those with sensory sensitivities, are they more affected with hot weather versus children who are not, or maybe older?
It could depend on the student's needs. I do want to say that, it can vary. Sometimes the warmer weather, some of those students like that better, just like, everybody else in the world, they have their particular favorites. But as far as sensory needs, and like the heat and stuff, I think having supports around to kind of help along with like the heat and the sweating and the reminders of waters, like that is very beneficial for students to have, just in general, actually. Yeah.
Good advice there with that too. So looking into being a parent myself, what are some of the practical steps I can take, and also other parents can do to help their kids stay comfortable and calm when we know it's going to be a really hot day, especially right now in the spring? Our average temperature should be in the 60s, and we were in the upper 80s. And sometimes my kids wanted to wear long sleeves, and I said, hey, let's go with the short sleeves today and make sure that we stay hydrated. What are some of the practical steps that myself and other parents can take when our kids are wanting to battle us with that sometimes?
Oh, I totally understand. Yes, we have students that come to school on days where it's 80 in the 80s and they're in sweatshirts and sweats, and you're like, oh my gosh. I think parents can, remind and try their best to continue the hydration, not just for a reminder for school, but to do it while they're at home, because the staying hydrated and stuff leads, the prior to school helps. But I think also, like you said, the reminders of like, hey, maybe when you're out at PE, we don't need to wear our sweatshirts. That teachers do a really great job at reminding students, are like, hey, if you're warm, like probably a good idea to take your sweatshirt off at this point. But I think parents can, do their best with staying hydrated, eating healthy foods and fruits and things like that to supplement and like prepare the students for when they are at school, because maybe they're social and they like forget to drink their waters or forget to drink eat their snacks. So I think doing prep work at home really helps for when they're at school.
One last question I have too, regarding with kids who are involved in activities and have after school activities. Do you see absenteeism going up with school, with attendance for everyday school days and activities as well, or do you think it's pretty minimal when it's hot?
I haven't noticed a decline in our attendance as far as like it pertaining to the warm weather. I actually think when it's colder, we have more absences.
Oh, okay.
But with the sport aspect and being involved in extracurriculars after school, I haven't seen that affect be the sole factor for our attendance issues we have. Yeah.
Well, good to know. I'll take all the advice from you to help my kids stay comfortable for school. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mackenzie. I really appreciate your time, and we'll be looking to talk with you sometime in the near future, maybe when it turns cold.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Riley, you have the advantage being a meteorologist as a parent. Come on, it's not fair.
Exactly, right? I will tell my kids, I'm like, okay, here's what the weather's, but they are very curious about it. They want to know specifically on what it's going to be, and they like to plan their outfits. So,
very good. And shout out to Mackenzie's husband, Scott Moak.
Yes.
We love him. Used to work here at Fox 40. You can find him in the Kings Arena, in-game announcer. All right, we'll be right back.
We're at Flybrave Autism Foundation Thrift and Coffee Shop because they're putting on their first ever Flamingo Run for Autism 5K. We're meeting with Vanessa and John to find out more about this event and how they decided when to have it due to the forecast. What is Flybrave Foundation and how did it start?
Flybrave started 10 years ago. John was aging out of school and I knew what he was capable of. And I knew his potential, but it was really hard to get employers to view that, as John is nonverbal and autistic. And so instead of staying frustrated, I decided to create Fly Brave. We just started as a grassroots effort with 4 families in my living room with hope and a prayer. And today we are 10, and we have a thrift store and a coffee shop, and everyone that works here is on the spectrum, and we have events and programs and services and classes and graphic design and all the things. And we serve 400 families every year, and everything we offer is free of charge.
Has a large storm ever impacted your business?
When we moved into this building 5 years ago, the roof had leaks here and there. We had a big major storm in 2023. There was a lot of storms, snow in the mountains. It was the same year John ran the 100-mile race, and there was extreme up there in Tahoe. And our roof actually caved in and flooded our store. So we had to close down for 2 weeks and clean the store. And there's a new roof on there now, but with weather in an old building, this building is from the 40s. Every time there's a major storm, we're checking every corner for leaks. And also when it's raining, customers don't typically want to go out and go shopping.
How did the Flamingo 5K come about?
My son John is 31 and he is a long distance runner. We found his gift of running about 10 years ago. We would go for long walks and a track was open one night. He ran around the track and had a wonderful night's rest, woke up just feeling different. And so I thought maybe there's something with running. So signed him up for the Special Olympics, and he started winning gold for a 5-minute mile. He was so talented, and a coach from another team invited him to do a 5K race, and he did, and that opened up a world of possibilities. We have an autism running club, and with John being a long distance runner, just even running 5Ks, 10Ks, even in the early years, I just saw his confidence blossom, and he would advocate for himself, and his wings just blossomed. And I thought, well, maybe there are other individuals in town that would benefit from running or walking. So 10 years ago, we created a running club, and we have about 30 runners, and some walk and some run, and we train for 5K races. So we do an 8-week training plan, and then we take these athletes with disabilities through their first 5K race and proving that they can do hard things. So we turned 10 this year, and we felt it was only fitting that we host our first race to celebrate 10 years and our community. And we're asking our community to come together to take all of these athletes with disabilities across the finish line with us.
Was weather a factor in picking the day of the event?
Last year, we ran a race on May the 4th, and it poured down rain. So during the spring, it's kind of up in the air of what weather's going to look like. April is Autism Acceptance Month, and we wanted to host our first race in April, but there are so many other events going on. May seemed like a good month. It's before the hot months of summer, before fall when kids are going back to school and families are back from vacation. May 17th just seemed like the ideal date.
What is the ideal weather for the run?
The morning to start the race, mid-70s would be perfect.
If the weather surprises you with rain, will the event still go on?
The event goes on rain or shine, so we would have ponchos on standby. John runs through 100-degree temperatures, 50-degree temperatures, pouring rain. With the Flamingo 5K, one thing that we need from our community is if you adopt a runner. So race registration is $50. This race isn't free for us. To put on a race, it's expensive, and costs have doubled through the years. And we want to make sure that every athlete with disabilities has the opportunity to participate. So we're asking our community members to adopt a runner.
Big thanks to Vanessa and John for having me out at Fly Brave today. The Flamingo 5K Run for Autism is set for May 17th at Crocker Park. You can sign up to run at flybrave.org/events. No matter what the forecast brings, it's all about community awareness and having fun along the way.
Thank you, Genevieve, for that incredible story. And thank you guys for joining us once again for another episode of Atmospheric Insight. See you next week.